You just downloaded Pro Tools, created a new session, and feel intimidated or you have no idea what you're looking at, then this video is for you. Hey, my name is Nico and I'm going to do a walkthrough of the basic functions in Pro Tools and the workspace and how to get you started. We'll have a look at the different edit modes, the zooms, the mix window, and some general functions. One thing to keep in mind is that every function or every mode I'm demonstrating has a shortcut to do it, but this is not what this video is about. I'm working in Pro Tools Ultimate, so depending on the version you're using, your space might look a little bit different, but you'll be able to use all the functions I'm demonstrating. Okay, so let's start with the edit window. At the top left corner of your screen, you have 4 edit modes. This first red one is shuffle mode, and what it does is it shuffles things around, meaning if I select this and press delete, it's gonna move everything over that spot. So it's useful if you're trying to link things together. The next mode in orange is spot mode. In this mode, when you click on an audio region, this window opens up and it lets you assign exactly where you'd like that audio to be moved to. So it could be a specific time or sync point, or it could be a specific bar or beat. The next mode is slip mode. In slip mode, you can basically move your audio freely and you're not attached or you don't snap to any grid. One quick trick you can do in slip mode, if you do want to snap to the grid, is hold down the command key on your keyboard. It will snap right to the grid. And so the next mode we're going to talk about is grid mode. You have 2 options in grid mode. One is relative grid and one is absolute grid. So what absolute grid does is when you move something, it's going to snap right to that grid point. So now if we take a look at relative grid, what it's going to do is it's going to move your audio relative to the grid. So it's not going to snap right onto the grid, but it's going to snap relative to the grid. So here you can see what I mean when I move this. Similar as slip with grid mode, if you don't want to move to a grid position like this, you can press command at the same time, and essentially when you press command, it's gonna act as if you were in slip mode. The next section here is your zoom section. If you click on the arrows on the side, it's gonna zoom in or zoom out. This audio zoom icon is going to change the height of your waveform. It's only a visual thing. It doesn't affect the audio level at all. The MIDI zoom icon does the same thing as the audio zoom, but obviously it's going to be for instrument tracks or MIDI tracks. Under this, you have 5 numbers, and what those 5 numbers are, they're called zoom memory. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and each zoom is sort of like a preset zoom. So you'll see you press 1, it goes like this. 2, it's going to start moving in. 3, a bit closer. Let me zoom back to 1. So if you select something and you zoom, let's say zoom 3, zooming in 4, and 5 even closer. This next one is also a zoom mode, and it's called the zoom toggle. And what that does, it will zoom in and fill in the screen with the selection you have. So I select this and I press this, it will fill in that selection. The whole selection is filling the space now, and I can click back out and it's going to zoom back out to the way we were. So there's another way to zoom. This one is going to be normal zoom, which if you select this, well, you kind of create your window. So whatever software you come from, you might be used to like doing it like this, where you just want to like click, drag, and open up what you're looking at. So if you like doing it like that, that's a good way of doing it. So there's just a different option to zoom. Under there, you have single zoom. So what single zoom does is after you're done zooming, it's going to go back to whatever editing mode you're in. So let's zoom, and you'll see the magnifying glass is going to go away and it's going to switch back to the editing mode we were in. So you can see now my cursor is back. So the next one, this one is tab to transients. So what that does, if that's activated, when you press your tab key on your keyboard, it will automatically tab and snap to the next transient it sees in your audio. So I'm going to press tab and it's going to go to the next transient that is sees. So you can keep pressing tabs and you see it snaps every time it sees a transient. It's not perfect, but you can see it works really well. So that's a good way if you want to do an edit on a beat. You just go there and you create your edit there. So that's tab to transient. Next editing mode is going to be the trim tool. So the trim tool, what that does, and you have a few options here, but we'll stick with the standard for now. But the trim tool basically does that. So you can trim your audio here. If you go towards the end, you can see those little bracket and you can trim things the way you want, like this. The next section is the selector tool. So that basically is what it is. You just select what you want, and that's your basic way of selecting things, I guess. The last one is your grabber tool, which if you click this, that's how you basically move things around. So the next thing you can do here is use what they call the smart tool, which essentially makes you use those three, however you have them assigned, depending on your placement, the cursor is going to switch to that. Okay, so if you have your smart tool here, essentially if you're at the beginning of a piece of audio or of a clip, it's going to act as a trim tool. When you're just browsing over, it's acting like your selecting tool. And if you place your cursor at the bottom half of an audio of your track, it's going to turn into a grabber tool. So you can see here, I'm up, and then it's a dragger tool. And this way also, if you go at the top corner of your audio, it's going to enable you to create fades. So this is the way I like to work with the smart tool, because it's a bit faster. You have access to all three. The scrubber tool is a way of like monitoring, of listening to what you have. So you can see here, if you click and drag here, and it's going to play that part, and you can hear. You can go backwards too. So all you do is press and drag. A way of accessing the scrub tool with the smart tool on is to press the control key. So here, if I press the control key with the smart tool on, you can see my cursor switches to this little speaker, and now I have access to the scrub tool here. So this pencil tool is to draw automations. So you can use it here. For example, if you go here, if you want to switch the view of your audio track to show something else, so you have the option of showing it as a block, which I guess is useful if you have a lot of track and you don't want to see the audio. You can see all the playlists. We don't have additional playlists for this, but if you had any other playlists, you would see them here open up a bunch of playlists. The waveform, which is the basic view, and then the volume, which shows the volume set here. So if you click here, it's give you a little fader. You can go up and down, and you can see this volume is moving along. And so the pencil tool, this guy, you can draw your automation the way you want. And you have all these different options. You can make a line. You can make triangles so that, so you have all kind of different ways, and it's pretty self-explanatory what it's doing. Okay, so let's go back to the smart tool, go back to waveform, and you can see you have the volume trim, you have the mute, you have the left pan and the right pan. And if you have plugins, you will also have access to their automation here. You would have the name of the plugin, and it will open up and have different automations that you can see and automate and play around with. But for now, let's go back to waveform. So we went through tab to transient, link, timeline, and edit. So if that's not selected, your playback and your edit. So if I press play, it doesn't start where I have my edits, but it starts where I have this playback arrow here. So you see, I press play. I always stay with this link timeline and edit selection. And I recommend you say like that, so everything what you select is what's going to play basically. The next one is link track and edit selection. So that what that means, I'm going to create a new track here. So let's do track new. I'll just create an audio track, create. What that means is whenever I edit something on one track, if I select the audio, the actual track is also going to be selected. So if I select something on that new audio one track here, this is going to be selected. So if I don't have that on, link track and edit selection, now if I select something here, you see this track is still selected. And that can be good for some things where you don't want things to jump around as much. But in most cases, for me, I want the audio I'm editing to select also the track that I'm on. The next one is insertion follows playback. So what that means is the insertion is those arrows here. So right now I don't have that selected. So insertion follows playback. So which means when I press play, this is not gonna follow where it's playing. So if I press play right now, you see this blue arrow didn't move, didn't follow my playback, which is good if you're recording vocals and you always want to start at the same spot. So if you have insertion follows playback on, now you're every time you stop, it's going to start from where you stopped before. So for example, if I press play, this blue arrow is going to follow. Now that I stop, you see it jump to the spot where I was. The next function here is automation follows edit. And so what that means is if I do an edit of the audio, the automations that I have written for that portion of audio is going to follow or is not going to follow. So for example, if we do a volume automation here, we'll do a volume automation with the pen tool, freehand, we'll just do something like this. We go back to our waveform view here in triple tool. If I select this, I have an automation, and if I paste it here, if I'm in this mode, let's switch back to volume, you see the automation copied along with it. But so now let's go back to waveform view. If I press this and I copy this and I go back here and then I paste it, you will see the automation did not follow my edit. So most of the time you would want automation to follow edit to be switched on. There might be times where you just want to copy something and you don't want to worry about the automation that you have. This next one is mirrored MIDI editing, and what that means is that if you copy or loop something in MIDI, it's going to copy any edits that you do. So let me demonstrate that. Let's create a new track and let's do a mono MIDI track, and then let's open up the MIDI editor here all the way at the bottom, and we'll go bar 2 here, and we'll draw some notes, and then let's switch back MIDI editor. So now if I copy this over here, and if this is a loop or it's a different section of the song, I would want if I do any modification here, I would want them to be applied here. So with MIDI editing engage, if I move, you'll see if I move something over here, it's moving the one over there too. So that's really handy if you do a lot of loop-based things. It's a really good way of working. The next option here is layered editing. And so what that means is if you have this one, layered editing on, if you cut something like that and you move it over, it will layer things, meaning it's not going to play the two at the same time, but it will not cut what's under. So if I go back, you can still see that piece of audio is still there. So it's going to play what's in front, but in case you need to adjust anything, it's still going to be there. So if you don't have layered editing on, if you move that, it's going to cut what's behind it. And so if you want to recover it, you're not going to be able to do it like that. So like the more you move, it's just going to remove what's behind it and kind of clean things up. And then if you want to open it back up, you would have to go back to those brackets and reopen it up. So it kind of depends the way you like to work. Most of the time I will work without it engaged and sort of like keep things cleaner. But that's kind of like a preference. So the main counter here shows you where your cursor is parked. So you can see here if I move. So if you wanted to go something specific, you could click here. That's, this is bar 4, beat 3. So I could do this. I could press type 10. And then it switches to bar 1. And then if I press return, it's going to jump there. The start and end here shows you if you have a selection where it starts. So it starts at bar 6 and ends at bar 14, the selection, and so on. And the length shows you the length of your selection. Now, this one is the resolution of your grid. You might not see the grid bar, and that might be because this is not selected. So if you press this shows the grid, and if you don't want to see the grid, you would press it and it's not highlighted. So yeah, this is the resolution of the grid. So you could have it bars, up to like whatever you want. You can have it dotted notes, you can have triplet notes, and so on. And nudge would be you can switch it to whatever resolution you want here, minutes, seconds, bar. So that's independent from this counter, as is the grid. And so nudge would be a lot of time I would keep it in minute, second, and have a nudge of like 10 milliseconds. And nudge, what you can do, if you press the plus and minus on your number pad, it will nudge it by that amount. So here, if I'm pressing plus and minus, then it nudges by that amount. If I make this 100 millisecond, it's going to move a lot more, and so on. So you can adjust the resolution, how big or how small you want it. So the next thing you have is pre-roll and post-roll. When you have pre-roll on, you will see this little yellow or orange flag here in front of that blue arrow. And so what that does, if you press play, it's going to start playing from that by whatever pre-roll amount you have. So it could be 1 bar or 2 bars, whatever you want. You can see I did 2 bars and now the little flag moved. So now if I press play or if I press record, it's going to play from there, but it's going to only start recording from here. Definitely really helpful for recording. One good way of doing it, let's see if I go in record here and I actually press record, it's going to play from here, but it's going to start recording here. So you see it plays there and then it starts recording once it gets to that spot. Post-roll is the same idea, but it gives you place after. So let's say you record something and you don't want it to stop right away. So you could have 1 extra beat, or let's do 2 beats after, so that it doesn't cut right away. Some people like to have a little bit of space after, so it doesn't feel like it's cut. So now it's going to play this whole thing. So if you're singing along, you sing along, it's only going to punch in this and it's going to keep playing through. So like that. So you see it plays, recording, blah, 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 and it keeps playing. And now you're done. You're recording only that punch. The fade in basically is if you press play or you press record on something, it's not going to be at full volume right away, and it's going to give you a little bit of a fade. Most likely you won't need to have that fade in option on. So those are your basic functions. Here would be your basic transport, forward, rewind, go back, go at the end, pause, play, record. If you right click on the play button, one function I would definitely use is the loop playback. It is exactly what it says. So if you play something, it's going to keep looping it over and over. So the record enable button here is what you would press if you're trying to record something. So first you would arm your track, and with the record enable pressed, you would start playing. You have a few options if you right click on the record enable button. The two functions that might be useful for you is loop record, which is gonna record in loop and create new playlists for each take you do. And the other one I would worry about is the quick punch function. Quick punch, if you're not familiar with that concept, lets you go into record on a track after you've started playback. Press play, and then I can punch in, I can press this, and now it's going to start recording. So that's super useful when you're tracking vocals or you're tracking anything. So that's how you would do that. That's quick punch. This wait for MIDI, I wouldn't worry about it, but it does. If you're recording on a MIDI track, on instrument track, it's not going to start recording until it starts seeing a MIDI note. The next button, the metronome, turns on and off your click if you have a click track. To create a click track, you go to the track menu and all the way down, press create click track. The Midi merge button makes it that if you're trying to record over something that already has MIDI on, it will not delete it. So if you don't have it on and you're recording a MIDI instrument, then it's going to delete everything that was previously there. So the conductor track is a way of creating advanced tempo changes. Most likely you're not going to have to do like tempo changes through your song, in the middle of the song or something like that. If you do, you would want the conductor track to be switched on. If not, you're in what's called manual tempo, which only lets you have one tempo at a time. You have a few options to adjust the tempo. One would be here. You could open up the tempo here and drag it the way you want it. You could click on the plus here and change the tempo. This online and MTC buttons are for synchronizing things with Pro Tools, and that's a bit too advanced for this tutorial, so I would just ignore it. So the next thing in the edit window is you have here with the newer versions, you now have Melodyne. So if you want to tune, that's one way you would put it on the track here, Melodyne, and then it pops up. And one way of accessing it is like pressing it on and off, and then that's one easy and quick way of tuning. Clip effect is if you want to assign, if you want to EQ, or if you want to compress this specific segment of an audio track, which can be useful in some situation, but it's not quite like you would put a plugin on a track. It's more for like if you specifically are trying to EQ or compress this thing in the track. So I would probably stay away from it. The MIDI editor is down there. You click it on and off. The key comes up. That's one way of accessing it. So the next thing here, one good way of working when you're a beginner would be to click here. Right now I have the I/O, the inputs and outputs, which is this thing. So I can assign what I want to come in, the channels or the buses, and I assign them to the output I want, which right now is just a stereo monitor, or you can assign them to different buses. And the next thing I have is the track color, which is just what's in front. And you see it just loses the color. It loses the color over there too, but you have all these other things that you can have on mic preamp if you have them available, comments if you want to write things. But I would have inserts here to get started so you can add plugins. So plugins, you would have those available, you click and then you would just go here and like find the plugin you want. And then the next thing I would have, and you can have two lines of sends too. The next thing I would have is sends. So you can use that, and you can use them as your regular sends to send stuff to reverb, bus, or compressors, or whatever you would do with sends. So I would say as a beginner, that's a good way of working, a good way of setting things up. Takes a bit more space on screen, but you kind of have access to everything. Couple more things you can see in here would be the groups here. So if I create, let's say I want to create those, if I want to group those tracks here, you can go here and you can do new groups. And so now those, it's called group one by default. Create a group, and now this group is gonna, you see, select everything. It's all grouped together the way we have it assigned. And if you don't wanna have it act as in a group, you would press it, it's deselected, and now you have access to individual track. You press the group here, now they all act as a group again. This is your tracks, so you see all the tracks you have right now. So you could select things from here. It's a good way. I like to use it to like reorder my tracks. You can just drag them, but you could right click on it and then you have all these options. You can bounce them, freeze, commit. A lot of options you can do, and that's a bit more advanced for right now. And this clip section here, this clip window, is all the audio file that you have in the session was either created through edit or that you imported. So you might not necessarily see them, but this is all the audio that's loaded in your session. Most of the time, you're probably not going to be using it, so I would just hide that. But if you're looking for a file, that might be one way of looking for it. Okay, so the other window that you might want to look at if you're mixing, the mix window. So you can switch to it here. You can go window and go mix here, or you can use this command. So you switch and your mix window looks like this. And here you can see you have the two columns of inserts, the two columns of sends. You have the option to assign the inputs, the outputs. You have your pan. You have your automation mode. So the mix window is all your faders. I usually have a lot of faders and I have everything open, but some people like to use it, like make it smaller and just sort of kind of have it here so they have access to like the volume here. But at the same time, if you have your edit window like this, you can just access the volume and the pans right over here. In your mix window, if you're not seeing something, you can go here, and there you have all the options of all the different things you can see. So you might want to see your EQ curve, you might want to see all kind of different things, your instruments, if you're using instruments, your preamp. So that's where you would switch things on. All right, thanks a lot for watching this video. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comment, and I'll see you in the next one.